So I'm going to go ahead and get started. We're going to do this. We have enough people. We'll have a good discussion. And, you guys who have seen some of the other sessions can maybe follow up on some of your comments or discussion points from before.
I'm going to share here in just a moment.
Okay. That's what I'm going to, that's your cue. Thank you. Excellent. So I'm going to do my little intro again. And Jeff and Ian, I apologize. These are not incredibly different from the earlier presentations that you heard. Again, we were just trying to target different audiences. So some of you may know that we are in the middle of updating our zoning ordinance. It's been a few years now, and we've been working on phase 1, and in the last few years been in and out of our legal review for the draft of phase 1. We're kicking off now phase 2. We actually did kick off phase 2 a few months ago, and we've been working on it. I'm looking for my notes, which had my bullet points for phase 2, and I'm just not finding them. So I'll have to go by off the top of my head. Okay, so just briefly, thank you, Lee. Yeah, so phase 1 will be released soon. I just heard back the last review that we just went through. I just got that back from legal. And so hopefully if there's not too many comments on, we'll be able to flip that to the public really soon. And when we do that, there'll be a completely, there'll be a separate review process, a separate public meeting process. And I'll be doing more in-person sessions to present the code and answer questions and just kind of give a summary of what we did with it. In general, the purpose of that code was to create a more development friendly code, to sort of update some of what we had in there to modern trends in building and development. We also wanted to fix some of the non-conformities. Our zoning ordinance, the standards for the districts were very different from what we have on the ground in our neighborhoods, which can cause a lot of people to have to get variances for certain things that they want to do. So a big part of phase 1 was making it easier for really property and homeowners to do basic things on their property, whether it be add a unit or do an addition without having to get 2 to 15 variances. Phase 1 really looked at the bulk of the city. It was coding all those areas that we have a pattern for, and we know what it's supposed to be, and we like what it is, and everything's going great, like the downtown core and most of our residential neighborhoods. And we weren't looking to change too much of like the highway commercial or the residential open space or the industrial or too many of those districts. We just wanted to better code for what is there to make development and redevelopment easier. Phase 2 is a little bit more focused on some certain areas that are in need of redevelopment, and for areas which we really don't have a comprehensive plan or a master vision for how we want them to redevelop. So you can see we've got multi-unit residential areas. A lot of our models for multi-unit residential areas are decades old, and there are a lot of new housing types that we don't have in Concord, what we call missing middle housing. So townhomes, smaller homes, cottage developments, and also just better models for apartment buildings that make better use of the space to create more sort of pedestrian oriented spaces and less disparate sort of vehicular oriented disconnected spaces. So that is one of the focus areas. Local commercial areas is in brown there. So you can see we've got Loudon Road and Fisherville Road highlighted, and tonight hopefully we'll be talking about Loudon Road. Those are just our commercial sprawling suburban strips. And folks are trying to do lots of different and more innovative things along those areas to redevelop them into more friendly and attractive places that are more integrated into the community, because we can see that both of those areas are surrounded by quite a bit of residential development. They're just not all very connected to each other. The regional commercial areas are in yellow. So really the mall and the big box development out there is the focus of that conversation. We do have several other gateway performance areas that, when they're ready to develop or redevelop, those standards could apply to those as well. And then finally, a new district that we were sort of saying, hey, what do you think about creating this new district? And we're calling that right now the flex industrial zones. And we're looking, we've targeted some sites to talk about these ideas, including the Southern Opportunity Corridor Performance District and the Whitney Road Extension. And we picked those two areas because Opportunity Corridor, obviously we have an entire master plan on the Opportunity Corridor, but there's not really a lot of direction for how to create some of the types of development we might want to see there. And there's not a lot of development, some vision in those documents that relates really well to the development that is in those neighborhoods. Then in the industrial zone up by Whitney Road, we chose that one because of all of the development that's happening at the Hoyt Road, you know, with the grocery store. People have come to us with different ideas about what could be done up there off of that road, off of Whitney Road Extension. And so, you know, ideas like maybe we want residential up there. Of course, residential is not allowed in that district. So we also have the OFP district, which, you know, for the last few decades has been the Office Park Performance District, which is not a very well, is not a very useful district because people aren't building office parks anymore. And that's almost the only thing that's allowed in there. So repurposing that district to be more relevant to, you know, development trends today and types of development that we don't have in Concord and that people are wanting to do. One of those being, for instance, live workspaces. And so, or maker spaces, spaces that you may have a workshop downstairs or some type of business downstairs and a housing up above. So these are some of the ideas that we thought about creating this new district to allow sort of office light industrial or in light industrial might be these types of workspaces I'm talking about, or, you know, light warehouse type uses that would normally be allowed in the industrial district, but that aren't necessarily inconsistent with residential development, and allowing other uses in there. So that's an idea. I'm going into it a little bit because it's kind of the most interesting one. It's the only new different district with different uses that we're proposing in this process. So phase 2 has 4 steps. And so step 1, as I said, we've already done a bunch of preparation the past few months. We're in step 2 right now, which is the visioning. So what we're going to be doing tonight is talking about some different precedents and some different models for these other types of development, and sort of ask the question, do you like this? Do we want to code for this type of development? To clarify, we're not suggesting that what is existing not be allowed anymore. Although if people feel like, yeah, you know, we really don't want to see that type of development anymore, that's certainly a possibility. But really the idea is to create codes to allow types of development that are not currently allowed because the codes are too restrictive, and they don't allow the type of development to occur. So that's what we're going to be doing tonight, is talking about these different development types and getting some feedback. So we have some polls, we have some short polls that you can answer and you can see what the results of the polls are. Step 3, our consultants, I did not introduce you again, Lee, I apologize. Lee Einsweiler and where is she? I don't see her. Kelsey. I kept seeing Kate, wanting to say Kate. Kelsey Morrow are our consultants from Austin, Texas with Code Studio. And we've been working with them on this entire process. They've chosen some, we together as part of the preparation picked some concept sites, and one off of Fisher, but there are a few in each of the focus areas. And they're going to take our feedback from this session and come up with some plans, some concepts to show us how that would be implemented on the ground in Concord. And then again, we'll have another series of visioning sessions and feedback sessions, and based on that feedback, they'll go back and they'll write the codes. Can you fast forward to the schedule? So, well, phase 1 took quite a long time because we just really restructured the entire code over that time. Phase 2, as I said, is really targeted on these specific districts. And so this is intended to be a much quicker process. So you can see right now we're in March. The phase 3 is intended to take a few months to come up with those concept designs. And then based on our feedback, they'll actually write the code. And then we will talk about those codes and see how we feel about the draft code. The hope is that by the end of this year, we'll be able to compile phase 1 and phase 2 documents together and present them to the public for adoption. Of course, after having these revision public, there'll be opportunities for the public to weigh in all along this process. You can go ahead to the next. Now I will introduce our vision session. So the purpose of this is again for us to ask you, how could some of these areas look in the future, and what is our vision for these areas? And then whatever we decide, or whatever based on this outreach and input we come up with, will be the basis for the codes that we come up with for these districts. So this is intended to be interactive. I was inviting you to, be on video if you want, or interject. At the last meeting that we had, people were sharing in the chat if they didn't want to speak. And then I was kind of reading out what was in the chat, and it was causing more discussions to occur, which was really interesting. We also have, I said, those online polls. And then at the end of this, Lee will give you a link to an online survey. It's basically just a document that allows you to give more feedback. And there will be a link on there, or you can sign up on there if you want to be part of our email list. And of course, you can always just call me or email me with questions or any emails, any comments or concerns that you have. So with that, I think we are going to start off with our first focus area, which is the multi-unit residential areas, and I'll pass it off to Lee.
Thank you, Heather. I apologize, I'm fighting a little bit of a cold, and when you see me staring off into space, I'm actually looking at your smiling faces up on the top screen. So it's not that I have a syndrome of some kind that you have to worry about. The multi-unit residential areas are these green mapped areas. There's a set of them near Loudon Road and another set up along Fisherville. Today, those areas look like this. This is the Loudon Road example. And so Loudon at East Side Drive, for example, you can see that there's a set of multifamily right here, for example. The multifamily today is not very connected to the adjacent areas. It is kind of, potted out separately. Here's an example off of Fisherville. The large single family area, but also the multi-unit areas. And they are disconnected really one from the other. And that's one of their challenges. An example of the apartments on East Side Drive, where really basically the public space is made up of parking lots, not really sidewalks and streets. The new apartments near Fisherville there are a slightly better example. They're organized along the road. The parking is tucked into the building instead. So a little better, but still not connecting to their neighbors and not acting like part of the community. So we wanted to show you some examples. And this is one from here in Austin. This is a former airport site that was redeveloped as both housing and mixed use. And in this particular case, you're kind of looking at a variety of housing types, all showing up within a couple blocks of each other. There are these townhomes, these single family units that are actually a duplex, one on the right, one on the left, a small lot single family model in which they're quite narrow buildings. You can see the infrastructure is pretty high end. Admittedly, the trees have to grow in, but there are bike paths and separate sidewalks. The multifamily has open spaces and is adjacent to a park. And there are some models like these two on the bottom, which look like a very large house, but actually the one on the left contains 6 units, the one on the right contains 4. So they're just kind of an alternative model for how we might have things look and how we might organize them into streets and blocks. Here's another example from Riverdale Park. You can see both a large apartment building here with an embedded parking garage, and then these ones that look a little bit like they're, half of a zipper are the townhouses. And on the right-hand side, the townhouse image is there on the bottom, and the apartment image is on the top. Those are examples as well of an alternative pattern. And we wanted to run a little poll here and ask you which you prefer, whether we should continue this apartment model in which we provide the parking in a massive pool sort of in front of the units, or whether it might make sense to look at an alternative in which the multifamily is organized a little bit differently along streets. So I'm launching a little poll that should pop up for you. And if you feel comfortable, feel free to answer the questions. There's just three: sort of keep what we're doing, try a new alternative, not necessarily this one that we're showing. Or if you're not sure, you're welcome to simply say you're not certain. I'm going to count heads. I think Ian wasn't going to answer questions, right?
I don't know. He didn't say.
So I'm going to say that I did get a very definitive answer, but I'm not going to share it. It's too small a group. But I will say that we are dominated by people, at least at this moment, who would like to consider a new alternative. And so I want to ask you one more question about those multi-unit residential areas. And that's this one, which is, which do you prefer, the sort of disconnected model that exists up there near Fisherville, in which the roads are separate from one another, and it's more difficult for people to traverse through the site. All you get is the single loop road, and there's just a single entrance and exit road for the majority of people, or whether the model on the right, whether it's a grid or still curvilinear, but this sort of more connected model that returns us back to more traditional patterns is worth considering in the future. So here's the little poll, same questions. You want to keep what we're doing, try a new alternative, or not really sure about it. So in this particular case, we have a little bit more not sure going on, which is understandable. These two are at very different densities, and you might be reacting to the images in that sense. And it's hard to know, but the others seem to be willing to try a new alternative. So we also have an opportunity to talk about local commercial areas. But before we get into that, was there anything that anybody wanted to comment on the imagery or anything from the multi-unit residential areas?
I'll add some comments, I guess, just because we have a small group and some time. I think that this is similar to, obviously I saw this pretty much the same thing on Tuesday, but just thinking about it, I like the way you portray that as we kind of return to traditional rather than try something new, because it really isn't new. And just, I guess, anecdotally, from my perspective, I've lived in Concord for a long time, and I've lived all around Concord in many neighborhoods around Concord. So those two images really speak to me. I've lived on a cul-de-sac in East Concord. I've lived on the Heights. I live on the Heights now, close to Loudon Road, and I've lived down in the South End. And to me, by far, I would consider the South End neighborhoods to be the best neighborhoods anywhere I've lived in town, just because of the walkability and the interconnectedness, the ability to walk wherever you want. I can go on a 3-mile walk every day of the week and go a different route. You can't do that anywhere else. And I think it's something we really miss up here in other parts of the city, particularly on the Heights, where, yeah, there's a lot of sidewalks up here in the Loudon Road, but it's not interconnected at all. And, I live on a dead end road, and there's nothing that connects us at all to other neighborhoods. And I would really like to see that you know, especially up here in the Loudon Road corridor, even if it's just a way to interconnect some of the existing neighborhoods. And so I'm definitely in favor of that kind of concept, to return to traditional, or at least make it more, you know, optional, for sure. In terms of the, you know, options between, you know, the multifamily, I think it's definitely important in my perspective to have mixed uses. You know, when I look at Loudon Road, again, I just think of, we have these multifamily uses next to these single family uses with no pedestrian access between them. And I understand that, you know, in the past, people may not have wanted to have that. But I would love to see that. I'm a little bit more on the fence on the idea of the, you know, getting rid of the sea of parking lot, as you say. I just know that, you know, my experience I've lived in the Southwest, so I've seen, you know, I love it out there. I know we have different issues up here in the Northeast than they do down in Austin, or even down, you know, in the lower parts of the East Coast here. And it becomes challenging in winter. And it's just something we want to pay attention to. And this is one of the questions I raised the other day, was when we're looking at particularly the Loudon Road corridor, I think it'd be great to have the option to do some of those type of developments, like the pictures you're showing. I don't see a situation ever where, you know, you can get the whole corridor to look like that, like it does somewhere else. I mean, it's all redevelopment out there at this point. You know, there's nothing new.
Yes.
So you could be talking about small parcels getting redeveloped one at a time. You know, if there's incentive to do larger pieces, or to combine parcels, or density incentives or something like that, that'd be great. But I think we do need to, you know, leave the option open for both types of development, even if we're incentivizing or providing something, you know, to make it look like those smaller pocket neighborhoods, or whatever you want to call them. It'd be great to see some of those mixed in out there. Anyways, that's probably
No, that was good, Jeff. Thank you very much for that. We covered a couple topics at once, admittedly, but that's quite all right.
Can I jump in too?
Sure.
I just want to say, my hope, Jeff, is that somebody picks a kind of an area or a parcel that's relatively large, and makes sort of a statement there. So you're right, it's going to happen incrementally. But for instance, on Fisherville Road, there's a 7-acre parcel. You know, somebody could really make a new statement there and show others what is possible and what could be done there. There's several parcels on Loudon Road that could be redeveloped into creating this type of development. And I think we just need that first one to say, hey, look what you can do, and look how this works. And I think that others might get really excited by that, and it might cause, I would hope it would cause some sort of, you know, domino effect with some other property owners that are ready to redevelop, but, you know, may not know what to do.
the other question I had, if I which maybe you'll talk about, I'm not sure, but it's hard for me to envision Loudon Road corridor without knowing what's going to happen to actual Loudon Road. Is there, and I'm not sure what is there something that we're looking at as part of this effort, or?
So one of the things you'll notice when Lee talks about this next topic area, some of the corridors are very similar to Loudon Road in terms of the way they function. They're 4-lane roads where they've just sort of redone the streetscapes and moved the development closer to the street. So I think that, you know, the Loudon Road project, when it was decided not to carry through with that a few years ago, in my opinion, a part of the reason that the public opinion swayed on that is because people couldn't imagine what we're talking about now. They couldn't imagine what the street and the buildings and the development would look like. They didn't understand how all of these pieces would work together to create this type of walkable, attractive neighborhood type environment, you know, with pedestrian improvements. So I think it's totally feasible for a major transformation on Loudon Road, but I think whether it stays the same as it is in terms of you know, the 4 lanes, or whether someday it transitions to something that is a little more manageable from a pedestrian perspective. I think we could really dramatically change the character of the streetscape and the connection with the neighborhood, and make the whole thing a whole lot more friendly to the people that live around there.
Okay, great. Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
Okay,
Can I make a
Ruth?
comment?
Yeah, jump in, Ruth. Thank you.
Yeah, I live in a multi-use development. I'm in a townhouse in Cranmore Ridge. So I go for a long walk each day, and I go deeper into East Concord because that's the only direction there are sidewalks. But I would say that most of my neighbors just walk within the complex. There's a large loop. They're not walking as far as I am. So I would agree with the assessment that there is a very big disconnect between those multi-use developments that are done in that manner, disconnect between those and their neighbors and the community. So it's just a personal observation.
Thank you.
Appreciate that, Ruth. Kate, did you want to share anything? Don't mean to pick on you.
Nope, I'm not local, so I'm probably not the best person to share.
Okay.
Thank you, though.
You're welcome. If everybody's comfortable, we'll move on to the commercial areas. Yeah. So again, you know, we're looking at this dark brown in this particular case is what's zoned commercially today, and exists both on Loudon Road and up here on Fisherville, and actually a tiny little piece down here. Again, the Loudon Road piece that's commercial has a lot of businesses that are very auto-oriented. They're set back from the street. This is a brand new one, for example. It's set back from the street with its parking in front. These ones are not only auto-oriented, they're kind of auto-serving. You've got a car wash and some other things over here. And most of the patterns, if you went from one development to the other, as if you could actually connect, you'd probably get in your car and drive there. You're unlikely to try to walk this corridor between the various businesses. So it's a little bit of a challenging corridor. Fisherville has the same challenges. Long distances, you know, with significant gaps between businesses. Although now we've got the older pharmacy here, and now we have the new coffee shop here on the corner. So this is a location that's maybe changing a little. We're getting a little bit of a node, but still in this case, you know, large expanses of asphalt are kind of what you see from the street. And those look a little bit, here's the Loudon Road example. There are some instances on Loudon where things are pulled right up with a little bit of landscaping. Admittedly, this is an older building that's still extant there today. But many of the businesses are set back, and all we have is these large parking lots and the long central road that leads to them. Same thing on Fisherville. Here's the pharmacy. This is a self-storage facility in a very strange building that's been adaptively reused next door to the self-storage. All of these are a little challenging to be walking around in between, in spite of the new sidewalk here and the pedestrian paths along Fisherville. Just not a great pedestrian environment there. So we wanted to, again, show you a few examples that are similar types of places. As Heather was saying earlier, here's that 4-lane road. And in fact, there's a turn lane on here and everything. Major signalized road, but the buildings are pulled up to the street. In the one case, the little commercial buildings are only 1 story tall, but we have a 3-story residential building pulled up to the street. In this case, a 2-story mixed-use building, probably offices above and retail below, and a Whole Foods. So you can even fit a large grocery store into these kinds of settings. So it's a possible kind of alternative development that we might begin thinking about. Again, a grocery store set right into a historic fabric of a neighborhood. Nice sidewalk treatments, new lighting along the street. There's also biking and pedestrian improvements. Here we have the bike lane, the car park lane, and marvelous wide sidewalk. And yet the businesses that you're seeing, these are not little specialty cute businesses like you might see in your downtown, for example. These are major chain stores that also build in the examples that you've seen in the previous photos, set back on the site, etc. But here they're pulled up to the street. You can imagine if the Dunkin' Donuts chain disappears, God forbid, that we would get something else, in here instead, and it would fit just fine. Could be some other restaurant. It could have turned into a bookstore. It could be most anything. So these are just some alternate patterns for some of these roads that we wanted you to have a look at and kind of think about. So here is our poll again. On the left is a fairly high quality commercial area, but it doesn't really have any sidewalks, and it has this large parking area in the front and the businesses in the back. And it's being compared on the right-hand side to an area that's pulled up to the street. So when we look at these local commercial areas, here's my poll. Do we want to kind of keep what we're doing and allowing them to be in a pattern that sets them back like that? Or are we willing to look at possible new alternatives for how these might be laid out on the site? So this one, it appears that everybody on this one was voting for a new alternative. So that's kind of exciting. I have another pair here, and this one focused a little bit more on the fact that it's exactly the same chain on the left. The Dunkin' Donuts is in the back, and here it is up in the front. And so again, if we're asking the question, are you comfortable with continuing on doing what we're doing as we're seeing on the left? Or do we want to begin to consider some new alternatives, more like on the right? Well, this is definitely the new alternative crowd. That's all I can say. Thank you for that. It appears that people prefer the sort of built up to the street model in place of the more parking lot derivative model. Anything that
Can I jump-
anybody?
Yeah,
Yes,
oh, sorry.
yes.
I was going to share. If you could just
Yes,
go back to show these. This is the one of the maybe two, one more. That's the street that I was talking about with Jeff, where it's actually a 4-lane road, and functions much the same way that Loudon Road does. It's a busy, thoroughfare road, and I think the main difference is the streetscape. So, the city got a bunch of grant money to do Main Street downtown, but part of what we are trying to do with this code is put some of that responsibility on the developer for new developments, that they would construct parts of these streetscapes, or at least we'd get them started, because that's basically the biggest part of what makes a street feel one way or another. It's what makes it feel wide and open and makes you feel sort of vulnerable in the space, versus whether you have lovely sidewalks, for lack of a better term, that are wide, or multi-use paths where you have bikes and sidewalks with trees, and these kind of with connections in certain areas, in some areas where they can be to these other spaces. So I think it's really a lot about how you're constructing your street frontage. And there's ways to do this that basically you move your building up to the street closer, but even if you're closer to the model on the left, you can still have a sidewalk with features along the street that or along the sidewalk that start to create that feeling with landscaping and the pedestrian. It's the scale, creating a pedestrian scale environment versus a vehicular scale environment. That's really what the biggest difference is. Sorry, I just wanted to.
That's
sort
okay.
of-
No, and did anybody else have any comments on the local commercial ideas we just went through?
I think that this looks great. I fully support this. I don't have many comments other than the fact that Dunkin' Donuts, as your example, I'm not sure if you get a Dunkin' Donuts to come to Concord that doesn't have a drive-through, but maybe. So,
You could actually have a functional drive-through on the one on the right.
good, yeah.
Yes, they basically and Starbucks and others can live with this model if you make them, but you have to make them. And that is that basically the drive-through lane is on the back of the building, and especially coming around the end as you exit back out to the street. So you can imagine there being an entrance here and driving through the parking lot, queuing up there, and coming back out here and picking up your coffee at the end of the building there. So there are models that they use for that.
That's the thing that I guess maybe would scare me a little bit about Loudon Road corridor is the idea of making people do it. You know, I would love to see that, you know, streetscapes in that corridor. You know, if we could get it started now, it may take a long time for it to get there. It may be another thing to, you know, force it to happen. But I think that, you know, whatever we can do now in the code to help enhance that or help, I guess, what do I want to say?
At least allow it.
Well, yeah, allow it. I mean, promote it, whatever, would be great. I mean, I think you're on the right track there for sure.
Thanks.
I think
Go ahead, Ruth.
the new alternative, the Dunkin' Donuts on the right and your other picture invites people to spend time. Whereas the old model Dunkin' Donuts, you drive there, you pick up what you're getting and you drive away. Likewise, the shopping mall.
No, that's very much true.
The wide sidewalks, the planters, the bench is in one of your pictures, invites people to come and spend time.
Completely true. So I have to agree with you there. Yes, it's very difficult as a small business owner not to have that cohesive nature of other businesses, right? So if everything is a big box and there is one business in it and they are separated from each other, you'll see some imagery in the mall section a little later. It's very difficult to get anybody just saying, oh, I'm here, I'm just going to walk down to the bookstore and have a look at the book while I'm having my coffee, or whatever. So yes, I'm with you. Let's talk just a little bit about the regional commercial. So the regional commercial areas are these large yellow areas. And there's actually one up in the north as well, kind of forming where the grocery store is up there. The mall area, Steeplegate Mall area, Fort Eddy, it's really the big box development areas, and then some areas that have been zoned for it that have not really built out yet. So this is the mall. I don't know if you recognize it from the air, but there it is. And DeMonte Drive, the major roadway that lies between the two streets, Sheep Davis and Loudon. And here are those big boxes. So I can't quite imagine anybody stopping in here, parking their car, and walking to this next big box. It's just not going to happen. They're going to get back in their car, and luckily they're connected, so you can sneak through the back. But then you're going to park over here and go to this big box. And visiting 4 stores means, you know, climbing in and out of your car 4 times as you move across these. Now, the mall used to be a model in which we did park once and went inside and walked around among various stores. But that model is busy dying off all across the country, especially interior malls. They are really struggling these days. Part of that is because the internet is giving them a little kick in the nuts, but it is also has to do with just the willingness to be in that environment. And that's become a little bit more problematic lately, especially with the epidemic. So we've not wanted to shop in that way. And so here's the existing conditions. There's DeMonte Drive, right, that runs between the mall and the big box. And here's what the mall looks like. It happens to be empty at this point in time, so you're seeing very few cars and the big entrance back in the distance. Here's another example along Fort Eddy. This is mostly big box, or there's kind of one strip center of smaller boxes. You're seeing it here in the background, Fort Eddy Shopping Center. Fort Eddy at least has a spine up the middle both ways. So it's a little more connected than some of what you were seeing along DeMonte Drive, but it is still widely separated, large single boxes, no mixing of uses. No residences inside here, not even really probably any offices in this area. So the existing condition is very different from some of the things that have been built recently and have seen great success in the marketplace. And here's an example. I don't know if any of you have been down to Blueback Square in Hartford, but it's a pretty amazing place. It used to be a series of car dealerships. So for those of us who, can't quite imagine that this stuff could happen, it actually does. Once the land becomes valuable enough, these alternative patterns are possible. Bear with me a second. Sorry about that. We'll see if we can get through this. So here is that area redeveloped. Inside it is a wide variety of uses, a public library, the church, you see the steeple in the background. There are residential buildings, shops on the ground floor. In many instances, the buildings have a very local character to them. They're all done in local brick, etc. And the window styles are reminiscent of local architecture. And so it's really become a well-beloved, very dense mixed-use place. Another example, perhaps a little bit more like yours, is this mall in Annapolis, Maryland, called the Town Center Mall, which has been replaced by this amazing development on the right. You'll see some large parking garages on the fringe, but there's a new spine road running down the middle where the mall used to be and connecting up all of the pieces. And here's what that looks like in person. Now, I'm not suggesting that this level of intensity, meaning this height, is necessarily the right answer for your mall site, but the infrastructure in this place is pretty amazing, right? These streetscapes are beautiful. It's still filled with the same big boxes of everywhere else. Here's Bed Bath & Beyond hiding in the background here, but it has a very active public realm. It's a lovely place to go visit and walk around. It's nowhere near like what a standard mall today looks like. So this has become, these kind of town center models have become the replacement in many instances for the mall that's there today. I want to share just a little bit more about Riverdale Park. So we've seen this image up above where we had the grocery and the other, but I wanted to show you these other housing types which are located in here. So townhouses and multifamily. So you're seeing here on the right that there's a variety of housing nearby these commercial uses that are in the bigger center component. So it's possible to imagine this mix of uses in a very rich sense. So once again, I'm going to poll you. We've been joined by Candace, by the way, and we're going to ask you, do we want to keep what we're doing now, or do we want to consider a different alternative? And so here's your poll. When you think about these regional alternative area, these regional commercial areas, are we interested in a new alternative, or to continue doing what we're doing today? Well, I'm going to say you guys are on a roll. You are suggesting once again that the new alternative is more appropriate. So I want you to look at this example. This is a little bit more of an aerial view, and we wanted to be certain that we were talking about this accurately. a fairly new mixed-use center on the left, and we could continue doing a single-purpose shopping center on the left. We can continue doing this. This has much nicer landscaping, etc. Or we can do something a little more dense and a little more mixed use, meaning put the residential into it in the upper floors, etc., as you see on the right. So I'm going to share another little poll with you and see what your thoughts are on that. Great. So this is one instance where a little more mixed, I suspect, because the example on the left is nicely landscaped and looks well organized and well connected. And the one on the right might be a little too intense for you. So it could be a little of that you're reacting to. But most were interested in considering some possible new alternate development patterns. So is there anything about those examples before we go on to industrial flex that you wanted to talk about?
Just ask, I mean, obviously those, sorry, this is Jeff again. I mean, I'm in favor of the new alternative there. I think it's great, particularly the ability to mix uses and get residential into some of those. That on that frame right there, that Plymouth Mass picture could be the Tilton outlet malls right now if it was captioned differently. It's a spitting image for it. What about the height though? I mean, you mentioned the height. I see, anything even closely remote to that West Hartford picture as needing some type of structured parking. Are we talking about increasing the height of buildings as part of this, or what's the thought on that then for multiple stories?
We are going to have that discussion for sure. I will say that most everything that is 3 stories and less, and sometimes up to 4, if it's mixed use with residential mixed with retail, is usually supported by surface parking. It's not that surface parking is completely gone from this image. In fact, you're really only seeing one set of structured parking. So you could imagine, for example, as the city did downtown, is they helped get a parking structure. I think the state helped with yours, actually. I don't know, but you basically get a parking structure, built and shared. But no, I don't think we are talking about things quite as intense as what you're seeing on the right. It's more about the pattern and the streetscape. And especially if we go back up to this one, we're not anticipating heights like this at all. But that does help support that high quality public realm. That's for sure.
So I'll share that, we've had multiple people come to us asking about possibilities for the mall site, and in the realm of 4 to 6 stories is what they've been looking for. Or 3 to 6 stories. So I do think that developers are thinking in these terms for these types of redevelopments. And I do think that structured parking for if you're going to do something really wow, you probably do need some type of limited at least type of structured parking. But my thinking is that if you try to put structured parking on the mall right now or anywhere out there, there's not worth it. But if you're going to put however many millions of dollars worth of development on a site and get that kind of a return, maybe it becomes worth it at some point. So what's the density you need to make the parking structure financially feasible, I think is my question. Because if we could build something like that and somebody said, hey, if you give me 6 stories and I'll do this, I think the city would probably say, heck yeah, we'd love to see that. So I think we don't know the economics of it entirely, but
But
Yeah,
often what happens,
there's obviously folks are building it. And they're building these things all over the nation, and they're doing it to make money. You know, they're not losing
Yes.
money.
so in prior years, mall redevelopment would have been done all at once. That's not, for the most part, the current model that's occurring. People are re-inhabiting portions of a mall with a community college, with a library, with a whatever they possibly can so that they can squeak a little rent out of it. And then they begin by adding some new buildings to the site. And they really don't get to the structured parking until they've run out of parking on the existing site. And so that can take, for a while. If we go back up to the image of the mall, this one, right? You could add a fair number of buildings served by parking, already here along both Loudon and DeMonte Drive. And it'd be a little tougher along Sheep Davis because there's just not as much room there. But they could be served by existing parking. You could easily take one tenant off the end of the mall and produce parking and, one portion of construction. We see malls being taken down, sort of from one side to the other. So that I was looking for something else, but I didn't see it. Anyway, the idea might be that you take, 1/3 and then another third and another third. They like to keep existing tenants and existing cash flow in for a while. The piece across the street would most likely happen the same way, where someone might come in with a smaller liner building out here at the street before they replaced the building in the back and, built up further. And perhaps in the next iteration, of course, this building would actually contain residential units. Kate has mentioned that someone is doing this sort of step-by-step mall at the Tuscan Village that's being built near the mall in Salem, New Hampshire. So I don't know if others had seen that, but she was mentioning that as an example.
So just go ahead, Jeff.
I was just say, yeah, I mean, to me, a lot of it does come down to that building height. So that's interesting, 3 to 6 stories. I mean, that's kind of what I was getting at, was exactly what Lee was just talking about. If it does get redeveloped in kind of piecemeal, it may take those taller, higher story buildings to be allowed there, which is how, and I don't see any downside to having, taller buildings out there, especially in that picture right there. What would be the problem with a 6-story building on that mall site right now? So anything, I would think we'd be wanting to promote that, whatever we can do to promote that vision. I mean, I think it's great. So whatever we need to do.
I was just going to throw in, because Lee, you inadvertently picked the Home Depot to talk about, and then this building becomes, but that's not likely to ever, there's a Shaw's, a Home Depot, a Target. So a lot of those things are not going anywhere. But I think to your point, like Shaw's, for instance, you can see along Loudon Road, it's half a parking lot. Yes. That may be available and appropriate to put some taller buildings there. And eventually somebody might want to put more, the idea is you incrementally add to it until someone says, you know what, let's add a parking structure and put some housing on top of Shaw's, or something like that. That's how it happens. It doesn't, the intent is not to wipe off or wipe out what is there. It's just to come up with a code that allows people to infill in dense ways that are eventually going to result in that type of development. I will note that, we have not been in favor of, we've had people come and say like, oh, can we put, a bank here, a drive through there, looking at all the blank space around the mall, asking to put all of these, like, just pad site it out, just chop it up and put in, whatever, 5 fast food stores, a bank, and a car wash. And that's not infill. That's not what we're looking for. We want somebody to come in and put that 6-story building in the corner and use the parking that's there. And then somebody else says, I'm going to put another 6-story building, on the other side of that parking lot. And eventually it becomes infilled with density and these streetscapes get created. And then somebody says, you know what, if I put a parking structure there, I can do, X.
One key to this is all of this is really the creation of a street network. So if you remember these other older pictures of the examples, you know, creating this network of streets through and inside these spaces is really critically important. So here you've taken a large piece of land and you've really only built kind of one street inside it with these traffic circles along it. But that street now is leading to, you know, everything that's adjacent to it. And the main streets continue to, you know, pass the site by. So, you know, imagine one of these is Loudon and, you know, the one on the backside is
Sheep Davis
Sheephaven. Thank you.
or
I wanna say-
DeMonte or any of
I
them.
want to say Sheephead. I don't know why I want to say Sheephead, but I do. So it's building the new infrastructure. And again, this can be done incrementally. You know, you could come in and do this box and this could all be surface parking, you know, and there's still surface parking here. Maybe eventually this is going away and, you know, it might become something else. And there's also a site back here. So that one does look like a cemetery, unlikely to redevelop, but you never know. Any other discussion on the large scale?
This is Ian. Hi. I just kind of had, it's a parking question, obviously, as we're talking about it. But if we're trying to make these kind of more dense developments easier to permit and build, you know, that development in West Haven was like tens of thousands of commercial and residential square footage, which would require a ton of parking based on the current, you know, zoning. And when it comes to parking requirements, is that something that the city is looking at changing or altering, or kind of what's the future of that for these more intensive uses for these multifamily or multi-use sites?
Can I take that one, Lee?
Yes.
You mind? So yes, it is part of the phase one draft proposal is looking at making parking easier or more related to what the uses are there. A lot of codes in phase two, there'll most likely be some components of that proposed as well. But in a lot of communities today, they've done away with parking minimums. So they're no longer saying you need to have at least 5 spaces per 1,000 square feet. Instead, they're saying you are not allowed to have more than 3 spaces per 1,000 square feet. So they're coming up with parking maximums, because what we find in these areas is that, you know, they're going to provide the parking. They want to have the parking. And some of these places want 25% more parking than they know that they need, because the parking becomes an advertisement in itself. You know, they want the parking in the front along the street because they feel like it's enticing people to come into the site. So, you know, if the community feels like that's an acceptable use, I don't think that's an acceptable use of our tax base, is to have a quarter of a parking lot empty because they want people to feel like there's a place to park. So there's like this sweet spot for some of these places in terms of parking. They want to have what they know full, and then they want to have this additional area where they don't think is going to be full empty to show people that there's parking. So so some places will come up with maximums so that they're not allowed to do that anymore. But you know, there's less of a concern, I think, in a lot of these commercial areas with parking, because these boxes, they're going to provide the parking that they need. So we are not at this point suggesting doing away with parking minimums, but some of our standards in the code are outdated and they demand more parking than is needed. So we have looked at those numbers to say, hey, let's lower these numbers. This isn't really what's needed anymore. But we have not, we're not proposing at this time to go that extra step to saying there's no longer a minimum. Now there's a maximum, which we could. I mean, if the community wanted to do that, it's just not what we felt like we were
Ian,
ready for.
if you glance at this Fort Eddy example, this is how dense you can be with surface parking, right? These guys have made parking spaces on every single little piece of land they possibly could in all the little triangles, all the little wedges, etc. They have used up every square inch for parking. But I'm pretty sure that they feel as though they can't build any more on this property until they get more parking. And so the only way that this place changes is to take something down and put some structured parking in so that there's more space for more building. So if
Which is not
Concord,
likely, that's not likely to happen in that area.
not soon,
anytime soon.
not
But
soon.
maybe the mall.
Maybe the mall, but the point being, this is a pattern that it's in equilibrium right now, right? It's as full as it can be. It's successful, you know, and it's doing fine, but it's not highly walkable. It's missing some of the other components that we might desire in the future. But we have to wait until this is no longer satisfying, until we get something new and different. And so the mall is a great example of where it, you know, the blush is off the rose, and we are not interested in the mall model anymore as a group. And so people are ending up thinking about these alternatives. But as they do that, then you have to do that in bits and pieces, slowly and incrementally. It's not just a magic wand waved overnight. And there will still be parking embedded in it, because you don't have, you know, a great transit system, although you could imagine perhaps better transit. You don't have the perfect bike paths and great walking paths from downtown that would walk out to the area of the mall. So you're kind of stuck with an auto-centric model for a while. But it could be the beginning of a new pattern. And I think especially thinking about those internal blocks and streets is critical, so that even when the parking is there, it's not the first and foremost element of what you see in site design. So we have just one more piece that we wanted to share with you, and that's about these industrial flex areas. So as Heather was saying, this is a piece that does not exist now. I mean, the land exists now, but there's an idea kind of out there that people are talking about and doing in other cities that is not coded for in Concord right now. And so we have the area in the north near Whitney Road, and some areas down in the south here. It's all of these pieces that are office performance that sort of fall into this idea. Many of them have real industrial businesses in them now, most of them light industrial, not heavy industrial, most of them inside buildings, you know, not with large yards, etc. So let's have a quick look. Here's the southern example. So here's the gas holder building. And one of the challenges of this area, of course, is there's a railroad track that runs down the middle of it. Then there's Hall Street, and then there's the freeway. On the west side, you have Main Street, but those of you who've driven up and down it know it's not flat like it looks in this picture. There's a lot of slope between Main Street and the sites. So this is a really challenging area. Oh, and I always forget to say the wetlands. Don't forget it's wet down here too. So a really challenging place to be thinking about and building. Same thing in its own way with the piece up on the north. So this is the Wheelabrator, and the grocery store is coming here now. And this site used to have a road that kind of went up here. Right now, it's just sort of a gravel road, but this is quite a steep slope, 20 or 30 or 40 feet up to the top of this bluff. And the bluff is pretty much disconnected from everything. And it's a highway that's back behind. We won't be able to connect to that. So what can this place be in the future? And we can think of lots of kinds of things, but we wanted to talk to you guys about perhaps what it might be. So we have some imagery here of the existing conditions in that southern area. There's the gas holder building. There are some old brick warehouses. There are some very underutilized sites that are busy deteriorating down there. There's lots of kind of big, empty, a bit disorganized parking lot down there. And on the northern site, the sports center isn't really on the site we wanted you to think about. but it's a landmark for those of you who might be thinking about that area. And you can see how much higher the land is back behind there. And one of the key things that that provides, here's the road going up internally here, this little tan road, but there are great views across the river to the other side because there's no bluff on the other side. It's down closer to flush with the water. So being up on top of this bluff would be an amazing place to experience. So we wanted to show you some examples of what perhaps some of these kinds of places might look like. And again, we've slipped back to Austin only because we know it well. So this is a set of small light industrial warehouses. And you can see they're surrounded by many, many more warehouses. But this little piece right here, this little road, became a new road with a distillery, a brewery, and a sake place on it, a winery at the end, a set of food services, all kinds of different things embedded in here now, including a Tesla sales facility, which is all digital. It's not really cars and people working on cars. And so what that can look like when you mix all those uses together is something like this. So here's the distillery, right? And they're making, heaven knows, this could be whiskey. They also make gin and bourbon. So I'm not quite certain what's in their tanks, but a little something that might be fun in there. And that allows them then to use this very casual space with just picnic tables and things and bring people out for events. And as part of what is really an industrial area, invite people in. Normally we think of industrial as something that, you want to stay away from. When this begins to happen and this kind of employment and entertainment facilities are available, soon you see housing coming in. In this particular case, though, this is ground floor live work. So there are also people living and working in the ground floors of these buildings in a way that actually adds to the vibrancy of this area. So it's mixed use, kind of pushing the spectrum beyond just residential and retail to residential, retail, and some light or makerspace industrial. Another example of the same thing, which is more of a reuse model, is down in Asheville, the River Arts District, which is a pretty amazing area. Enormous amount of arts tourism goes to that area. New building was added recently that has apartments above and live work units again on the ground floor. Those live work units are set up for artists who can be a contributor to this environment that's going on in this area. So again, a wide variety of uses coming together in a single area. And in this particular, one more example, sorry, Camp North End in Charlotte, a lovely example of embracing history as Concord has through trying to hang on to the gas holder building, for example. But these kinds of flexible activity spaces in which you just pop up, whether it's a farmer's market or an artist fair or something else, the wide mixing of uses, light industrial, residential, and office into all of the existing buildings. And you can see the relationship in this particular case to downtown Charlotte, just outside of the downtown area. And finally, I have an example that is more an entertainment based one. If we wanted to think about what this might look like. So here are a couple of existing industrial buildings, and the reuse here is really about the spaces in between. And so you're seeing these activity spaces. It's parking in this aerial photo, but here it is being used perhaps on a weekend for an event. And this back here, this little wedge, is this lovely amphitheater that you're seeing on the bottom. So this becomes a large entertainment destination in addition to supporting the activities in the industrial buildings and potentially new residential and other things nearby. So the question here is not about the urban form, which we've been asking a lot about in the other questions, but this poll question that we want to ask you is really just about use, whether you feel comfortable mixing, whether you'd like to keep the same kinds of uses and keep these areas dominated by the light industrial uses that are there, or whether you would actually like to see more kinds of uses embedded in these areas to support them and enhance them. So I'm launching the poll again, same poll that we've been doing. Keep the same uses, allow new kinds of uses, or not at all certain about it. Well, we are hitting it out of the park for allowing new uses into these areas. I think we are equally interested in that. We want to make certain that the existing businesses can stay if they would like to stay, but that there are opportunities for new kinds of uses if they want to come. So before we finish up, I just wanted to tell you that if you wanted to give us a longer answer, or you're shy in public and you didn't want to say anything, if you go to the ConcordNEXT.info website, you will be able soon to watch any of these presentations that we've given. We've recorded each of them. You'll be able to watch them again if you chose to, or watch one that you didn't attend. And there's also a link there to a Google form that just lets you sort of speak your mind. And in addition, if you wanted to, it allows you to upload images of places that you think might be good models of places that you would like to see in Concord. And I also want to say that we are in the next step, and before the next workshop, we're going to be working on 4 different specific areas and looking at design answers for those areas. So one is at Loudon Road and Eastside Drive. Another is at Fisherville near Manor here. The final 2 are that Southern OCP and the area along DeMonte Drive. We'll provide you with some more examples of what development might look there. And in a couple of cases, we're going to actually draw you some scenarios that you can look at and tell us whether you think they're appropriate for those areas or not. And so with that, if anyone had any closing thoughts, I'd be happy to hear them. And if not, I will go get some chicken soup for my nose.
I commented on all the other ones, so I'll comment on this one. This one, I think it's you know, hitting it out of the park. I think that underutilized industrial areas. I mean, I see that everywhere, you know, not just in Concord, and it's a big problem. I mean, bringing in flex uses or mixed uses is something that's needed everywhere. And I think that could have a regional impact, you know, if we could get it right in Concord. I know that there's housing needs in other communities, and right now in my line of work, we're finding resistance to bringing that into industrial areas. And it's something that we need to figure out how to do it, you know, statewide. If we can figure out how to do it in Concord, that'd be fantastic. So I think all those examples are great. I think you're absolutely on the right track there, from my opinion.
Appreciate it, Jeff. Thank you. Others? Ruth, did you have any comments on the overall?
Great presentation, and I love the new designs. I would love to see that happen in Concord. And
thank you. We
thank you.
appreciate that, Ruth. Anyone else? Candace, I apologize for not introducing you as one of the council persons, but did you want to share anything?
No, this was very interesting, and I look forward. I'm sorry I joined late. So
That's okay. That's okay.
It's on,
These will be
they're
posted. You can
recorded.
watch them. Yeah. you
Yeah,
can watch
these are
them
going to be
after the fact.
recorded and placed on the website, so you can watch any one of them once we get them posted.
okay.
And if you're really
thanks.
clever, you can watch them at double speed and it won't take as long.
Heather, can
Well,
you guys just recap real quickly what the next, when we'll be hearing from you again?
So let me go back up to the timeline that we gave you, because that's the easiest
Close your
way.
eyes so you don't get seasick.
Yeah, sorry. So we're kind of here at the end, towards the end of the visioning, and we'll take about 3 months, and we'll be back out to see you again in June.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
And part of that, so we're gonna, and I need to get the word out about this too. have, I'm not sure, Lee, if we want to do 2 weeks or 4 weeks, but have kind of a cutoff period. So all these presentations will be available online, and we're actively seeking feedback. But at a certain point, we'll sort of be saying, okay, we got all this feedback, and now we're just going to really focus on trucking on those concepts and those, graphic representations of implementing these ideas. But we can still take feedback all along, I guess, but it would be nice if we could get a push for people to sort of, view it online and give, fill out some of those online forms.
And we'll do a summary of all the polls from all the sessions together so that you can sort of see what the different groups were thinking. I don't think we'll separate them, especially since we had such a smaller group this last time. So we'll
Yeah.
combine everybody together and kind of share what all the folks were saying. So that we'll be able to post in probably a couple weeks time. So keep watching that ConcordNEXT.info site. Sorry about the not.com, not .net, not anything sensible, but .info will have to do. And thank you all very much for coming. You were a great audience, and we'll talk to you again sometime soon.
Thanks, guys.
Everybody.